$110 million. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's the massive exit number entrepreneur Mickey Rowlson achieved. But honestly, what's truly mind-blowing here isn't just the final payout. It's where he started. Picture our little stickman protagonist for this explainer. Just a few years prior, he was dragging around a heavy, dark cloud of $30,000 in debt. And then, boom, jumping for joy with $110 million. So you're probably wondering, how on earth do you bridge that massive gap? Well, according to Mickey, if you get the very beginning right, winning becomes kind of automatic. Imagine our plucky stickman guy for a second. In one scenario, he's sweating, straining, just absolutely killing himself trying to push a massive boulder up a steep hill. This is basically the traditional way people start businesses, right? Trying to carve out a niche in a super crowded market and literally fighting competitors for every single inch of momentum. But then, look at the flip side. Our stickman is effortlessly rolling that exact same boulder downhill. This is the ultimate paradigm shift. When you find a massive market that is just absolutely desperate for a solution, the momentum literally does the heavy lifting for you. Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to walk step by step through the exact blueprint, this crazy playbook that took our stickman from barely treading water in debt to standing on top of a legitimate wealth empire. So here is the roadmap our stickman is going to follow today. We're starting with the billion-dollar market, moving into high-leverage business models, the lean learning loop, selling before you build, the black car product, and finally scaling you and your business. All right, step 1, the billion-dollar market, finding desperate buyers. So once you actually spot a gap in the market, you absolutely have to qualify it. Because if you choose a tiny market, you literally have to dominate the entire thing just to survive. But in a massive market, our stickman only needs to grab a tiny, tiny sliver of the pie to win big. And there's actually a super simple math formula to qualify this. You take the total number of potential customers, multiply it by the annual price of your product, and that total, it needs to be greater than $1 billion. Let's put that into perspective. When Mashiach started his company, he noticed that car dealerships couldn't easily sell cars online. So he Googled it and found there were just over 48,000 dealerships in the US. He estimated, they'd probably pay about $36,000 a year for software. Multiply those together, and boom, our stickman easily clears that billion-dollar hurdle with a massive $1.7 billion market.
Moving right along to step 2, high-leverage business models, multiplying your stickman output.
Now, if our stickman runs an agency, just trading his hours for dollars, he is stuck in a massive low-leverage trap. He basically just traded his 9-to-5 for an exhausting 24/7. But in a high-leverage business, imagine him pressing down on a giant mechanical lever. Just 1 hour of work produces these massive compounding results. And to build that giant lever, you got to follow 4 strict rules. First, a recurring revenue model, so you sell once but get paid repeatedly. Second, profit margins of at least 70%. Third, you absolutely must scale through technology. Picture our stickman working a giant system of gears instead of just throwing more people at the problem. And fourth, you have to 100% own the product. No dropshipping, no affiliate marketing, you own the whole shebang. All right, step 3, the lean learning loop, proving your idea works. Here's the thing, even if you have a massive market and a killer high leverage model, you can still fall flat on your face if you don't validate your idea properly. It all starts by solving the what, how, who dilemma. See, people don't buy features, right? First, you got to nail the what. That is the specific desired outcome or life change the buyer is desperately looking for. Second is the how, which is your proprietary, unique method for guiding the buyer through the maze to actually deliver that change. But listen, even if they completely buy into the what and the how, they are not going to hand over their cash unless you prove the who. Like, who are you to deliver this? You absolutely need credentials, testimonials, and reviews to build that rock-solid trust. So to figure out if people actually want your what, how, and who, you use what's called the lean learning loop. Let's say our stickman is a chef with a cooking blog, right? And he wants to write a book. Well, instead of locking himself away and spending months writing it, he lists his hypothesis. People will buy my book. Then he validates leanly. He literally spends maybe 1 hour building a simple Buy My Book webpage that just asks for an email if they're interested. Finally, he collects the data. If, say, 3,000 people click that button, and historical data shows about 10% will actually buy, well, he just validated an extra $12,000 a month before writing a single page. How crazy is that? Which brings us to step 4, selling before you build, the customer advisory board. Now, that exact same logic from the cooking blog, it applies directly to software and big business.
I mean it. The absolute fastest way to fail is to build your product first. It's a massive startup killer. Instead, here is the exact script you use to sell before you build. Our stickman reaches out to, say, 50 ideal customers a day. Not to sell, but just asking for advice to help shape a new solution. And spoiler alert, people love giving advice. So after a great chat, he invites them to join a customer advisory board. He offers them a massive 70% lifetime discount, cue the cheering stickmen, just to help shape the product roadmap. All they have to do is sign a letter of interest or an LOI. It's totally non-binding, but it proves they're actually serious. You get 10 of these LOIs signed, and only then do you actually start building.
Okay, step 5, the black car product, staying incredibly lean. Get this. A staggering 42% of startups die right at this exact stage because they build bloated, overly complicated tools trying to wow literally everyone. To avoid that total disaster, you have to follow this legendary advice from Henry Ford. Your first release shouldn't do 10 things moderately well. No way. Just like a crew of stickman mechanics focusing on one single vehicle, your product should be so narrowly scoped that it is a singular tool designed to solve one specific problem, and one problem only, period. You do not build new features until you've repeatedly solved that very first problem. And to build this super lean product, you obviously need a lean team. Novice entrepreneurs always think, oh, more people equals faster progress. Actually, scratch that. It really just equals more management nightmares. You gotta use Jeff Bezos' famous rule, build a pizza squad. If your stickman crew can't be fed by just 2 pizzas, meaning they're larger than 5 to 8 people, your team is too big. Keep your crew under 8 people until you clear that first $1 million in sales.
Finally, step 6, scaling you and your business, surviving your own growth.
So the business is working, money is coming in, but now the ultimate chokehold on the company's growth is actually you. Surviving your own growth is literally the hardest part. Think about this. Sequoia Capital is one of the most successful venture capital firms on earth, right? They only invest in the top 0.1% of companies. Yet within 18 months, 45% of the founding CEOs of those elite companies get fired. Just let that sink in. Why? Because early-stage companies often double or triple in revenue yearly. And if the CEO doesn't grow their personal skills 200 to 300% to match that pace, they get replaced. To make sure our stickman doesn't get fired from his own company, he has to build a triad of influence. At the base, peers, 5 people at the exact same stage for mutual support. Next up, mentors, 3 people a few years ahead for unbiased advice. And crucially, these should not be your investors. You want totally objective advice. And at the very top, heroes, billionaires, industry legends. But listen, do not cold email them. The gap is just way too wide. Instead, consume their content, read their books like Phil Knight's Shoe Dog or Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About Hard Things. So, the absolutely crucial point here is freeing yourself from the daily repetitive operations so you can actually focus on being that high-level CEO. You have to look at what is already working in your business, find those successful patterns, and then use the document and delegate method. Have your absolute best performer, like our stickman eagerly writing out his playbook, record themselves doing the task to write a completely foolproof guide, then simply delegate it to your department leads. By shifting your mindset from pushing a boulder uphill to instead validating leanly, selling before you build, and strictly documenting what works, you completely change the game. So I want to leave you with this. Thinking about your own life and your own work right now, what successful pattern in your daily grind are you going to document and delegate first? Start there, grab your lever, and go find your downhill slope.